In a quiet town, a black waiter's kindness toward two orphan children led to an extraordinary event 2 decades later. A helicopter landing outside his modest home. The roar of its blades sliced through the morning calm. Michael Anthony Carter, now 45, was washing dishes in his simple kitchen when the neighborhood paused, staring at the sleek black helicopter settling in front of his gate. Two refined figures stepped out, a tall man in a crisp suit and a woman with an air of elegance, walking directly toward his door. Michael dried his hands slowly, a peaceful smile crossing his face, as if he'd long awaited this moment. 20 years earlier, Michael was just another black waiter struggling to get by at the Silver Spoon, a high-end restaurant where patrons barely noticed him while ordering. At 25, he worked double shifts, mornings as a custodian, afternoons and evenings as a waiter, to support his ailing mother. It was on a chilly December night that everything shifted. Two shivering orphans, a 10-year-old boy named Noah and an 8-year-old girl named Lila, appeared at the restaurant's back entrance. They had lost their parents in a tragic crash and had been surviving on the streets for weeks. Michael made a decision that changed their lives forever. He began secretly giving them food each night. 3 weeks later, the restaurant's manager, William Kessler, a 50-year-old white man with a smug sense of superiority, caught Michael in the act. "You think this is a charity kitchen?" he yelled, firing Michael in front of the staff. "You ungrateful black man. You're lucky to have a job, and you're wasting our food on street kids." Michael left quietly, but he continued to share whatever little he had with the children. Then, one day, Noah and Lila vanished, taken by social services to a distant orphanage. Now, 2 decades later, as Michael watched the two elegant figures approach, a subtle smile played on his lips. Through years of low-paying jobs, constant belittlement, and outright humiliation, he had kept a secret no one could have suspected. If you're curious about how two homeless orphans connect to a helicopter landing at a former waiter's doorstep, get ready to uncover how small acts of compassion can lead to unpredictable turns of fate. If this story is tugging at your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what's coming will transform how you see justice and retribution. The ordeal at the Silver Spoon was just the start. William Kessler wasn't satisfied with merely firing Michael. He spread word around town that the problem waiter had been caught stealing food. With strategic calls to other restaurant owners, Kessler ensured Michael was blacklisted from every decent establishment. "You need to understand people like him," Kessler told fellow owners over lunch at an exclusive club. "Give them an opportunity, and they'll take everything. I thought I was being generous hiring a black guy, but they always show their true colors." Meanwhile, Michael scoured the city for any work: car washes, distributing flyers, cleaning offices late at night. Anything to earn a few dollars. His mother, Mrs. Clara, watched her son return home exhausted, his clothes soiled, his pride battered. A diabetic dependent on Michael's care, she whispered as she tended his wounds, "My son, you're worth more than this town can see." And she was right. What Kessler and his allies didn't know was that Michael held a business administration degree from the state university, earned with top honors. He worked as a waiter not for lack of ambition, but to manage flexible hours for his mother's care. For years, he kept his diploma tucked away, accepting the world's view of him as a disposable worker. But Noah and Lila sparked something in him. Even after his firing, even when he went hungry, Michael kept feeding the children. He sold his possessions, took degrading side jobs, whatever it took to ensure they didn't starve. One night, carrying leftovers from a wedding he'd helped clean, Michael overheard familiar voices outside the private club. Kessler and his business associates were on the porch, drinking whiskey and laughing. "Look at that," Kessler mocked, pointing at Michael. "The thief waiter's out there collecting scraps like a stray dog, probably selling stolen food for drugs. It's always the same with his kind." Michael paused, his blood boiling. He could have crossed the street, climbed those marble steps, and confronted them with the truth of who he was. He could have waved his degree in their faces. But then he thought of Noah and Lila, waiting in a cold alley. Taking a deep breath, he adjusted the bag of food and walked on. Kessler and his friends laughed louder, mistaking his silence for surrender. They had no idea how wrong they were. That night, after feeding the children, Michael sat in the small room he shared with his mother and opened an old notebook. He began recording names, dates, and fragments of conversations he'd overheard at the Silver Spoon. Months of waiting tables had exposed him to valuable information: business deals, tax evasion schemes, even racist comments customers made, assuming he was invisible. One day, he muttered, "You'll see you underestimated the wrong man." 3 weeks later, Noah and Lila disappeared. Michael searched desperately until he learned they'd been sent to an orphanage in another state. He tried to visit, but was turned away. No family, no visitation rights. That was the breaking point. Michael realized hoping for justice wasn't enough. He had to forge it himself. What Kessler and his allies couldn't see was that every insult, every closed door, every denied opportunity was shaping a strategist who knew their weaknesses better than they did, and now had every reason to use that knowledge against them. Over the next 2 years, while Kessler reveled in his triumph, Michael was building something remarkable. Working 16-hour days at dead-end jobs, he spent every spare moment applying his college education. His notebook evolved into detailed spreadsheets. The conversations he'd overheard at the Silver Spoon revealed a damning pattern. Kessler and his club friends weren't just prejudiced, they were habitual tax evaders. Years of overpriced contracts, unreported employees, and falsified receipts. Michael had names, dates, exact amounts. His mother passed away on a rainy Tuesday, holding his hand and whispering, "Don't let anger consume you, son. Turn this pain into something greater." At her bedside in the public hospital, after a 6-hour wait for care, Michael vowed to do just that. At Mrs. Clara's funeral, he met Dr. Daniel Lim, a tax attorney and old college friend of his mother. The son of Korean immigrants, Lim understood the sting of prejudice disguised as professionalism. "Your mother spoke of you," he said, handing Michael his card. "She said you had greatness in you, but the world was trying to convince you otherwise." Michael shared his notebook with Lim. The lawyer flipped through the pages, his eyes widening. "This is a tax evasion goldmine," he murmured. "If even half of this is accurate—" "It's all accurate," Michael interrupted. "I was there when they said it. They thought I was nobody." Lim closed the notebook. "You have 2 paths. Turn this over to the IRS and hope they act, or we build a case so airtight they can't ignore it." Meanwhile, Kessler expanded his empire, acquiring 2 rival restaurants with the same playbook: white employees in visible roles, minimum wages for others, and contracts that existed only on paper. His arrogance grew with his wealth. "Did you hear the thief waiter's a janitor now?" He chuckled at a business lunch. "Karma's real. People like him need to learn their place." What Kessler didn't know was that the janitor now cleaned the building housing his accounting office 3 nights a week. Michael had photographed hundreds of documents, copied spreadsheets, and recorded incriminating conversations through thin walls. Lim was impressed by Michael's precision. "You should have been a detective," he said, organizing evidence into folders. "This is professional-grade work." "I had good teachers," Michael replied, recalling his college classes on scientific methodology. "Now I have personal stakes." The turning point came when Michael learned Kessler was planning a massive expansion, a restaurant chain backed by international investors, reliant on a spotless reputation and government approvals. "It's now or never," Lim said, tapping his desk. "If he secures those deals, he'll be untouchable." Michael gazed out at the city that had underestimated him. He no longer felt like the humiliated waiter of 2 years ago. "He thinks he crushed me," he said, turning to Lim with a determined smile. "He just gave me time to prepare." Lim nodded, seeing in Michael the same drive for justice that fueled his own career. "Then let's show him who's really playing this game." The plan was set, the evidence organized, the right contacts alerted. Michael remembered his mother's words about turning pain into progress. Kessler had misjudged the power of a man with nothing to lose and everything to prove. For months, people saw only a quiet janitor cleaning offices. They didn't realize they were watching a strategist amassing weapons for a battle Kessler didn't even know was coming. The first blow landed on a Tuesday in March. Kessler's chief accountant, Larson, called in a panic. "Mr. Kessler, the IRS is here. They want 5 years' worth of documents." Kessler laughed, adjusting his designer tie as he surveyed the city from his 20th floor office. "Routine, Larson. Show them our books." "Sir, they're not asking for the official books. They have documents I've never seen, spreadsheets, payment records that shouldn't exist." Kessler's smile faded. "What do you mean, shouldn't exist?" "They know about the ghost employees, the inflated contracts, even that Cayman Islands account you said was secret." Across town, Michael was watching the morning news when Lim called, barely containing his excitement. "It started. The IRS took our complaint and moved faster than we expected. 5 years of evidence, perfectly organized." Michael closed his eyes, thinking of his mother. "She'd be proud," he whispered. "But this is just the start. The Justice Department's been tipped off, and the Health Department got a file on working conditions in Kessler's restaurants." 2 days later, the second blow hit. Kessler was pitching to international investors when his assistant burst in. "Mr. Kessler, journalists are downstairs asking about slave labor and tax evasion claims. The local paper's running a story tomorrow." The lead investor, a stern German named Herr Braun, frowned. "What's this, Kessler? We don't partner with shady operations." "It's a misunderstanding," Kessler stammered, sweat beading on his brow. "Some disgruntled ex-employee." The next day's newspaper proved otherwise. The front-page expose, titled "Food Empire Built on Exploitation and Fraud," included photos, documents, and employee testimonies. It detailed black workers earning half the wages of white colleagues for the same roles, deplorable working conditions, and intricate tax schemes. Most damning was a recording from an anonymous source, capturing Kessler saying, "Negroes need to know their place. I pay them the minimum because that's all they're worth." Kessler called the paper in a fury. "Where did you get this?" "It's a setup." The reporter replied calmly, "We have hours of recordings, hundreds of documents, and 42 former employees' testimonies." Care to comment? The third blow was catastrophic. Investors pulled out, banks froze accounts, and 3 restaurants lost their licenses. Employees filed lawsuits en masse. During an emergency meeting with his lawyers, Kessler's phone rang. "Hello? Who is this?" "Hi, boss." The voice was steady, polite, with a hint of irony. "Michael Anthony Carter. Remember me? The waiter you fired 3 years ago for feeding orphans." Kessler paled as his lawyers watched. How did I get all this?" "Did you really think a man with a business degree and top grades would just sit back after you humiliated him?" Michael said, gazing out his modest office window. "I cleaned your accounting building for 3 years. Ever wonder how much you hear through thin walls or find on desks when the invisible are working?" Kessler's legs buckled. "Recording private conversations is illegal. Illegal is dodging millions in taxes. Illegal is paying black workers half for the same job. Illegal is fostering a workplace rooted in racial degradation," Michael replied evenly. "I just documented the truth. What do you want?" "Money," Kessler pleaded. Michael chuckled. "You still don't get it. I don't need anything from you. I already have everything. Your Cayman Islands account? The IRS has the statements. Those shell company contracts? They're with the DA. And the recordings about teaching blacks their place? They're on their way to every local TV station." Kessler nearly dropped the phone. "That'll ruin me." "No, Mr. Kessler. You ruined yourself. I just documented it." At that moment, his assistant rushed in. "Mr. Kessler, employees are quitting in droves. The union's here, and a TV crew wants an interview." Kessler covered the phone. Tell them I'm not here. They said they have recordings and will run them without your side if you don't talk. Mr. Kessler, you still there? Michael's voice cut through. Why are you doing this? Kessler whispered, broken. Because 3 years ago, you chose to humiliate a man feeding hungry kids. You spread lies to ensure I'd never work again. You treated people like garbage. I was just a son caring for his sick mother. The difference? I didn't need to crush others to rise. That afternoon, as employees left with their belongings, Kessler sat alone in his empty office. His secretary resigned via email, his accountant vanished, and even the doorman gave him a cold nod. Across town, Lim called Michael. The German investors want to meet. They're impressed by your methods and want you for internal auditing. Michael smiled, recalling his mother's words about building from pain. Kessler had tried to break him, but only made him stronger. That night, TV stations aired the collapse of Kessler's empire. Employees shared stories of discrimination, experts discussed tax evasion's impact, and the question lingered: who was the anonymous source behind the evidence? Kessler, watching from his repossessed mansion, knew exactly who it was. The waiter he'd swatted away like a fly had orchestrated his downfall. 6 months later, Michael worked from a sleek penthouse office. His auditing firm, co-founded with Lim, was thriving, specializing in exposing discriminatory practices in corporations. The Kessler case became a business school staple, illustrating how patience and precision could topple untouchable empires. Michael lectured at universities, saying, "The best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's building what they could never fathom." Kessler, bankrupt and disgraced, worked as a gas station night manager. His former club friends barely acknowledged him. His arrogance had given way to bitter regret, realizing he'd underestimated the wrong man. His downfall sparked lawsuits, federal probes, and a congressional inquiry into restaurant industry discrimination. He became a cautionary tale of how prejudice destroys both its victims and its perpetrators. On a sunny Thursday, Michael heard helicopter blades. His assistant burst in. "Mr. Carter, a helicopter's landing on the helipad. 2 people want to see you." Michael smiled, sensing the moment he'd awaited. 20 years had passed since he last saw Noah and Lila, but he knew they'd reunite. When the elevator opened, he recognized them instantly. Noah, now a sophisticated businessman, owned a chain of ethical restaurants hiring vulnerable people. Lila, a prominent human rights lawyer, fought racial discrimination cases. "Michael," Noah said, shaking his hand warmly, "we knew we'd see you again." "You've become what I always knew you could," Michael replied, emotional. Lila showed him clippings about the Kessler case. "We followed it all. When your name appeared, we knew it was you. The man who fed us as kids, the one who toppled an empire of prejudice," Noah said. They talked for hours. Noah shared how his restaurants honored Michael's lessons of dignity. Lila said every courtroom victory was a tribute to his blend of kindness and strategy. "We kept that drawing we made for you," Lila said, revealing a faded sketch of a figure shielding 2 children in a storm, now framed with care. Michael hugged them, feeling a chapter close. "Every document I gathered, every recording I made, was for kids like you." Lila pulled out a proposal. "We want to start a foundation together, programs for at-risk kids, restaurants as training centers for dignity and work," Noah explained. "We have investors, government backing, and a network ready to join. But we need someone who knows justice is built, not just spoken." That afternoon, as they planned the foundation, Michael looked out at the city. Somewhere, Kessler was nursing his defeat, unable to grasp how he'd lost to someone he deemed lesser. But Michael felt no anger, only pride in proving intelligence and integrity outlast arrogance. 2 years later, the Carter Noah Foundation was a national leader in fighting discrimination, helping 500 children with education, 2,000 families with legal aid, and running 8 restaurant schools. On national TV, Michael was asked, "What do you tell those facing discrimination like you did?" He smiled. Revenge destroys, justice builds. Kessler tried to break me, but he taught me I could be greater than he ever dreamed. His mother's wisdom, turned pain into progress, had prevailed. Every child helped by the foundation was a victory over every Kessler in the world. If this story of resilience and justice moved you, share how you'd handle similar prejudice. Have you faced workplace discrimination? How did you respond? Subscribe for more stories proving true revenge isn't destruction. It's building something greater than your enemies could ever imagine. Success always outshines any insult.